Alrighty, hi everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jocelyn Nicholas. I'll be presenting tonight. We'll be looking at how to sell your tenanted property, especially a student rental in Ontario, and we'll look at some tenant rights and responsibilities as they relate to the home selling process. And of course, we'll look at some examples and things that you can do as an investor to net a high profit, especially because I know most student rental owners are investors. So we'll take time and look at how you can still sell in these market conditions and still make a profit. Alrighty, so before we start, I'll just go into some housekeeping things. One of the questions that we get the most about is regarding the recording. So yes, we are recording this webinar and the recording will be made available. We do have a YouTube channel where we post all of our webinars. And the YouTube channel is, if you search my name, Jocelyn Nicholas, you'll be able to see it and you can go as far as maybe like we've been doing these webinars for a couple of years now. So you can kind of look through the different topics that are of interest to you. And of course, this webinar will be there as well in the next couple of days. Next, I just wanted to say that if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat box. We do have questions that were submitted ahead of time. So if you see me looking on my phone, I'm looking at some of those questions. So we'll answer those first, and then we'll dive into the different questions that are coming in. Sometimes we might not get to the end of all the questions just because people submit a lot of questions. However, if you still have a question and you're here live, I will prioritize the questions that are here, and then we'll go into the questions that were submitted ahead of time. However, if I don't answer your question today, if you're one of those people that submitted a question ahead of time, if I don't get to it, I'll call you and I'll answer that question one-on-one. Okay? Lastly, I just wanted to say that sometimes, depending on the scenario that people are in, we offer a one-on-one consultation. So if you have a student rental in this area, or you're thinking about selling your student rental and you wanted to get a customized solution or like a one-on-one consultation to kind of look at the situation, please let us know. We're always happy to take a specific look at your situation. So feel free to let us know. We're going to put a link in the chat box where you can go to schedule a one-on-one consultation with me, and I'll sit down and look at your situation and what's going on. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get started. Okay, so as I said, my name is Jocelyn Nicholas. I'm a real estate broker in this area, Kitchener-Waterloo, Guelph, and Hamilton. I've been investing in real estate for the last 10 years. Our very first property was in Toronto, but then we moved out, we went to Kitchener, and we did Hamilton, Niagara. And one of the reasons why I'm very experienced in these markets is because I have properties in those markets. My clients have properties in those markets. So I move back and forth between Hamilton, Kitchener-Waterloo, and Guelph. My background is economics. So I did my undergrad at McMaster University. And then I did my master's degree in economics at Wilfrid Laurier University. I've been working as a realtor for the last 5 years. And before that, I worked in the government, public sector as an economist. Today, we'll be talking about selling some tenanted properties, and a lot of the experience that I'm bringing to this conversation comes from my own experience as a seller, but also my experience selling my clients' properties. So we're going to look at some of those, some scenarios and some examples, but if you have specific questions, as I said, please feel free to let us know. Alrighty, so today we're going to look at a quick market update. We're going to look at some of the things as tenants that you have, that tenants have as rights, and then we're going to look at rights for landlords in Ontario. I wanted to just say that if we're looking at this, there's a lot of tenant rights and landlord rights, but now we're looking at this as they relate to the home selling process. Okay, so we're going to look at some practical examples and advice, and then we'll look at a checklist for someone who's ready to sell a property right now. Okay, so a quick market update. As many of you would know, a lot of investors, we've been tracking inflation and looking where it's going. But if there's someone here who doesn't know where our market has been, inflation has been going up over the last few years. It peaked at around 8%, and then it started coming down. And right now, we are at around 1.6. That was the number that was reported for October. and we're at 1.6%, which the Bank of Canada is happy about. For the last few months, inflation has been within the blue area, as you can see on the graph, and that is the Bank of Canada target, a max of 2% and basically around 1 point above or below 2%. So that's where the Bank of Canada likes to see inflation. And because of that, rates have been coming down, and the Bank of Canada has promised that we'll see more rate cuts as inflation stays under control. Talking of rates, we've had the highest rates that we've seen in at least a decade, So right now rates where they went up all the way to 5% as the overnight rate, and now it's been coming down. So we've had 3 consecutive cuts, and now we are 3.75. Sorry, I think we have an error there. It's not 3.73, it's 3.75. That's where we are right now. And activity is picking up in the market. And of course, with proper presentation, homes are still selling with multiple offers. In fact, this week I had a client that I was working with, and we were on the buy side. We bid on a couple properties, and some homes had like 8, 9 offers. And that is very surprising because we haven't seen much of that in the past few months. So to see multiple offer situations and to see homes sell, in this case, one of the homes was listed around 700 and it sold for 900. So the bid, I won't be quick to say that the bidding competition is coming back, but I'd like to say that as a seller, we're in a market where you can still sell your home. I know we've gone through markets where being a seller was such a difficult thing, but right now we're coming back to the point where if a home is well presented, and I underline that, because I see a lot of realtors and a lot of sellers who just put homes on market and hope that they will sell. That was the case in 2020 and 2021, but in today's market, we have to do more work. We have to get the home ready. It has to show well and be presentable. And those are all steps that we can walk you through if you're working with one of our agents. Alrighty, so in terms of prices, as you can see, this is the price curve or trend since 2011. One thing that I like to mention is that real estate is a long game, if I can say that. And what I mean by that is that the market will fluctuate over time, but the long-term trend is upwards. In the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen big fluctuations. It started with the height of the market in 2022, and then prices, of course, went down as rates came up. And we've now seen an up and down scenario where as rates come down, people get excited to come back in the market, but then as with what's happening with our economy, people are scared. So we've seen a fluctuation, but this is what I want to tell you. With student rentals, it's different. With student rentals, they're so in demand. You have to be in the right neighborhood at the right time. So I want you to know that as you're looking at properties as an investor, do not just take what the media is saying as the truth for you, because with student rentals, we've definitely seen a whole different market. For example, if you're in Kitchener-Waterloo and Guelph, last year, starting February all the way to April, student rentals were a hot commodity. They were selling quick. You just have to present it well, be in the right neighborhood. And why is that? Is because the universities have increased their intake, their pre-pandemic intake by at least 30%. So if they're increasing their pre-pandemic intake by that many students, they need that much more accommodation, and they don't have any. And it takes time to build. So because of that, these statistics that we see on average for other homes do not really apply for student rentals, because what we've seen is that the market is good for those who have the right homes in the right neighborhoods. Okay. Also, as a student rental, I am seeing inventory conversations come up in Guelph, where the University of Guelph is thinking about building some 5,000 units over the next 4 years. So if you're a homeowner right now, I would challenge you to look at those numbers, be aware of what's happening in the city that you're investing in, because that will also impact your sale price And also that will impact your rents, because if the university is bringing in 5,000 additional units, that is 5,000 students that don't need accommodation anymore. So as an investor, I'm not saying this to scare anybody, but I'm just saying, please stay up to date. If you just, stay in touch with what's happening in your city, you get to know some of those things, and you can prepare yourself and decide when's a good time to sell, depending on what else is going on with your property. Okay. Alrighty, so we've looked at some statistics. Now let's look at some practical things. I find that with selling a student rental, timing is everything. If you take one thing away from this presentation, is that timing for student rental is everything. We see that a lot of parents, especially at the University of Guelph and Kitchener-Waterloo universities, and Wilfrid Laurier, Conestoga, most of these families find out their admission in January, February, and March. So around that time, that's when parents are starting to search for housing for their kids. Also, around the same time, students who are already in residence will be out as of April. So all the students, majority of the students know that if they're going to be out of residence by April, they need to find a place to move to as of May 1st. So we see a lot of parents and a lot of students with their parents looking around. I would say probably anywhere between, if you're a good investor who wants to be on the money on these things, you have to have your home ready as of, I'm even going to go as far as saying January 31st. You have to have your home ready for market so that we can have it on market right around February and March. One of the best times to sell as an investor is actually going to be February, because that gives you 2 months notice that you can give to the tenants if it's purchased by a parent whose child is moving in. I'll get to that point later on, but that if you sell your home by the end of February, then you have the whole month of March and the whole month of April to issue 60 days notice for the new family to get their vacant possession. We'll get to that point later, but I just want to emphasize how important timing is. We've had some clients that have reached out to us a year before they're ready. So if you have students that are on leases right now and their leases don't expire until maybe February of 2026, that's okay. You're still in the right place, I just want to investors to understand that when you're selling a student rental, sometimes planning ahead helps, because if you I've seen also like homes in the same neighborhood. If one sells in February, March, April, versus selling in September, you're attracting a whole different clientele, right? If you're selling around that February to April time, you're appealing to the student rental market, parents, and other investors who are looking to take over student rentals. However, if you wait until September, now you're selling to a family, and by selling to a family, you're competing with all the other homes that are in the different neighborhoods in Guelph. Okay. Another thing that I like to mention too is that you have to keep in mind that around mid-March to somewhere in April, students are doing their final papers are due, and they're also getting ready for exams. And of course, April is exam period. So I find that it's not a perfect time to have a home on the market. As I said, the best time right now, from the different years that we've done this, February has been a good month because the students are usually more flexible. We can go there for showings without much struggle. However, if we wait well into April, some students are writing exams, and we kind of have to work with their schedule. And some of them are doing all-nighters and things like that, or some of them are already working. So we find that the schedule doesn't work quite well. And also that interrupts that closing schedule that we're talking about. So if you're looking to rent that unit out, then you're going to miss out on the May 1st move-in date that most students are used to. However, if you're a parent and you're looking for to have a place for your child to move in, it gives you flexibility on the move-in date because you can control that. However, my advice would be that if you're a seller right now looking to target another seller, looking to target another buyer who's an investor, absolutely May 1st is the move-in date that we most know. And I'm pretty sure most people who are on this webinar know that. Another point that I like to point out also is that we have to follow the LTV regulations when selling a property. And I will go into details on what that means. Okay, so as a tenant, they have the right to occupy the rental unit within a fixed lease term as well as a month-to-month lease. So if you have tenants that are on a month-to-month lease, they still have the right to stay in that property. So you can't just kick them out because you're selling. This becomes even more pronounced when the tenants are on a lease. So you have to wait until the term is up to kick them out. That being said, you can still sell the property, but we just have to approach it with the mindset that either the tenants are on a lease or they're on a month-to-month lease. And we have to make sure that whoever is buying it will either assume the tenants and take over the leases, or if their child is moving in, they have to wait until the lease is up and the tenants on a month-to-month and then issue notice. We have to give a minimum of 24-hour notice for accessing the property. So this applies to all the showings, photography, staging, whatever we're doing to the property in order to access those rooms. We have to give them a minimum of 24-hour notice. So usually that's something that I would take care of. Our clients don't have to deal with any of that. We just take over and make sure that we do the right thing, as I said. We also have to give a minimum of 60 days notice if the tenant is on a month-to-month lease, which is what I was talking about earlier, that if you sell by the end of February, then you have the whole month of March and the whole month of April to issue notice to the tenants. I also just want to say that sometimes investors come in and they think that, February is far and we can take our time and all that. I would challenge you to work the timeline backwards and see if you need to be on market in February. Let's say right now is when you should be connecting with the proper professionals, trying to assess, your timelines, what you need to go to market. Do you need to do any renovations, things like that? And also when you're doing renovations, don't just sometimes people invest money that they don't really get a return on. I would challenge you to connect with a professional who can guide you. In this case, if you're in this market, you can reach out to us and we can give you a list of repairs that will give you the highest return on your investment. Because not every repair will give you a return on your investment. Not every repair will help sell for a better price. So if you wanted to know some of the top repairs that we always recommend to investors, especially with student rentals, there are certain things that you can do that will make that home ready to sell when the parent or another investor comes along. Okay, so as a landlord, you cannot interfere with tenants' reasonable enjoyment of the rental unit. So this is where I guess things like if they have a meeting or they're working from home or they have exams, this is where we have to kind of work with them so that, I know if we issue notice, we can go into that unit or we can go into that room, but we have to be careful. And for me, my approach is always to work with them instead of enforcing things on them. I find that we get a better result when we have a cooperative work environment versus if I just go there and say, hey, the law says we have, that's not how we work. So we have to always make sure that it's a give and take, that we're being accommodating, and also that with that, we can still enforce the rules in a cooperative way. So as a landlord, you have the right to sell your property at any time. Whether the tenants are on a lease or not, you can sell your property, right? We just have to be careful. We understand what's going on and we sell it the right way. One thing you must understand is that in the agreement of purchase and sale, that I would say 90% of properties in Ontario will go through that Form 100. If you do not specify the tenant situation, it automatically says that you will give vacant possession to the buyer. So I've seen a situation where the tenants or the students are on a lease. Right here in our market, it's common for people to be on 3-year leases or 4-year leases. Sometimes the seller or the seller's agent do not specify what's going on or that there's multiple year lease in place. And if you don't do that, you basically automatically you're agreeing to providing vacant possession. And we've seen this costs a lot of money to the seller because the seller now has to try and negotiate with the tenants to move out. We don't want you to be in that situation, which is why we always talk about these issues and say, hey, if you're thinking about selling, let's talk and make sure that we understand what's going on. And so we can write an agreement that protects you as a seller. You have the right to make repairs. We've walked some of our clients through the different steps of making renovations. And also, as I said, renovations will bring the highest return on investment. I always recommend, for example, that if you have any issues with water, like if there's a leak or something where there's water, please fix that as soon as possible because buyers don't like to see that there's water issues in a property. And also water damage is bad. It's something that will cause major problems in the future. So we like to control the situation before it gets worse, but also we want to assure buyers that there's no problems. If there's anything to do with a leakage or something where there's water coming into the property or into the foundation, we want to take care of that as soon as possible. That's an example of something that you can fix quite right away, and that will bring a high return on your investment. Because if you don't fix it, anybody who's going to buy that property is always going to have to build in the cost of fixing a leakage, because that's something that has to be fixed right away. You also have the right to enter the property with 24-hour notice. And we've seen situations where the tenant needs accommodation, or maybe they've read online that they basically want to restrict access to the property. In that case, with our experience and also the situation we've dealt with, we know how to navigate that situation by letting them know in a firm, cooperative way that we have to have access to the property. They cannot restrict showings. In fact, by restricting showings, that is cause for eviction. Of course, we don't say it that way because we're not looking to pick a fight, right? I've learned that with tenants, if you avoid fights, you can always achieve more of what you want to achieve. So this is something that I want lenders to understand, that if you have a tenant who doesn't want to allow showings, we have ways around it. And it's your right to access the property if you have proper notice. Okay, so some of the things that we see all the time, and some of the things that I want you as a seller to think about as you're getting ready to sell your property is, things like, are we selling a vacant property? Can we provide vacant possession, or should the buyer assume the tenants? So buyers assuming the tenants usually occur in a situation where tenants are on a lease. Like I was saying, here in our market, it's very common for landlords to have a multi-year lease. So they'll have like 3-year leases. And in that case, you cannot kick those people out. And the only way for you to sell the property is either to negotiate with them and try to end the lease early, which in this case, you might have to pay them, or you have to sell the property where the buyer assumes the tenants. If the buyer assumes the tenants, or if that's what you need to do to get the property sold, this will reduce the buyer pool to investors only. And I've seen that in this market, we have investors and we have a lot of parents who are buying a place for their child to move into. So this is something that may result in a reduced sale price because now we have a smaller pool of buyers. Another scenario, as I was saying, is to provide vacant possession, and there's 2 ways to provide vacant possession. One way is using the N11, which is a mutual agreement to end the tenancy. Some people call it cash for keys. And in this situation, as I was saying, cooperation is key. You have to make sure that you're working with the tenants. Some people have asked me, how do you get an N11? This is usually negotiable. We've seen situations where we just have to talk to the tenants, find out what's important to them. Some clients don't feel comfortable doing this. Don't you worry. We have professionals in place who have experience, and they can do this for you. If you have questions or you want to know how this works, we've helped clients do it themselves. But those who can't do it, we've also helped them, introduce them to the right people who can do it for them. Okay. Another way to get vacant possession is using an N12, which is where you serve notice to end the tenancy. And this can only happen if the tenants are not on a lease. They're on a month-to-month lease. And also, you can't just evict them because you're selling. So this has to be a situation where the purchaser or the purchaser's immediate family is moving in. In this case, a lot of the times it's because the purchaser who's the parent has a son or daughter who's moving into the property. And we usually facilitate that. We have a team of professionals that can go in there, issue N12 for you or the N11 if that's what you need. And they can do all that for you legally and also to make sure that they protect you. In Ontario, if you're proven to have acted in bad faith, you can be fined up to 50,000. And I've seen situations where people will try to do funny things. Let me tell you, people are getting like, tenants, a lot of tenants know the law. And those who don't know are turning to Google and searching and finding out that they can, basically they're getting to see, it used to be that people would act in bad faith thinking that people will not find out, but we're not in that world anymore. So my advice to landlords and to sellers is to act as if this case is going to end up in court. That way, if it does, you're protected. So we're acting in good faith. We're doing all the paperwork properly, and we're not lying or anything. We're just being professional because that's the best way to run a business. Okay, so if you're here and you have a student rental that you want to sell and you don't know where to start, this is basically some of the steps that you can take to try and get that student rental ready or to make a move forward. First thing is I would like for you to confirm your timelines based on your circumstances. I've had clients who have, mortgages coming up for renewal, or the tenant lease is ending, or they just are in a position where they're ready. Maybe life has happened and they don't want to continue managing this property. So we need to confirm your timelines and then match them to the timeline of when is the best time to sell a student rental. Like I said earlier, if you sell out of that window, then you're just selling to any family, in which case you're competing with all the other homes around the different neighborhoods in Guelph. However, if you're sticking to that timeline of student rental, now you're appealing to all the different families that are looking for student rental. Last year, the student rental market was very, very hot. And we didn't see the same level of activity in homes that were farther from the university. So this is a sign that most parents want to buy something that their child will move into. And as they start finding out about the admission and that their child is going to need a place to live, they start buying. And if you're that person, that seller who's thinking about selling, we could definitely start talking and see how to get you to that finish line. Please, please, please do not sign any new leases, because if you sign a new lease, now you're restricting the buyer, you're restricting the number of buyers we can get out there, because now with a lease in place, there's little flexibility to whether or not you can give vacant possession. The next step I'd like for you to do is to inspect the property. Go to the property, look at what needs to be done, assess the condition, because I know sometimes the student rentals, if it can be a rough space. It's not every home that I've seen that would be like that, but a lot of student rentals, definitely, if a parent's gonna buy it, they like to see that it's a place where their child can live. So my advice to investors is, let's do what we can to repair some of the things. Like I was saying, if there's any water problems, if there's any like mold or things like that, let's definitely get those things fixed. And of course, if there's a budget to do more, then I can come in and recommend some of the things that you can do. One of the things I've done with my clients is I'll just walk the property with them, and we'll look at some of the things that we can do to help the property sell for more. Next, you have to start talking to your tenants about potentially selling the property. Some clients don't feel comfortable doing this, and if they introduce our team to the tenants, we can then take over and talk to the tenants, set the expectation, and start having those conversations. And in my experience, from that first initial conversation, I can tell exactly how the process will go. And I'm not saying like I can, it's not always 100%, but I definitely have a solid idea of the kind of tenant we're working with. Are they going to be cooperative? A lot of students are very good people. They're not looking to make trouble. They just want to leave there, go to university and graduate. But a lot of the times we can go in there, and if it's going to be a problem situation, in most cases, we know right away, and we can start to prepare and to set expectations so that they know what we expect. And of course, we make sure to tell them that we're going to do everything legally. Nobody's going to, break the rules, because the first thing that happens when you tell your tenants that you're selling is that they go on Google and they start Googling, and then they find all these places where they're telling tenants that landlords are bad people, they're going to take advantage of you. So usually what we do is we have an open conversation and we tell them right there and then that we're not looking to break any rules and that everything will be done legally. And also we invite a space for them to ask questions, or we just open that relationship so that we can know what's going on. And if we're making a schedule for showings, we want to know what's happening so that we can try and accommodate where possible. I remember a few years ago, I had a tenant who had just gone through surgery and they needed a week to be at home. In that situation, if they just had surgery, we can work around the schedule and list around the time when we can have access to that room. Because if we go to market today and someone is in the room, they're sleeping because they had surgery, most buyers wouldn't even feel comfortable going into that room knowing that somebody in there is sleeping. So these are all things that we have to think about and schedule around. Okay, so then the fifth point is we have to try and make repairs that have the highest return on investment. I think I've said this point so many times now that, but one thing I want to drive home is one of the mistakes that we do as investors is to over improve the property. And I'm saying this because I've done it. When I started 10 years ago, I didn't know what I was doing for the most part, right? We were in a good market, so the market was forgiving. But in today's market, if you make mistakes like that, where you're spending money that you don't need to spend, the market might not be as forgiving. You might not get that money back. And as an investor, that's not what we want to see. Okay, so here's my information. If anybody has any questions, please let us know. Right now, I'm just going to take a second and start looking at the questions that were submitted ahead of time. Okay. All righty. Sorry. Alrighty, so we have some questions. And the first question I have right now is, I own a rental unit in Waterloo and want to know what is the best time a month to sell a rental unit. So if this is a question for any rental unit, then I'd say, any time is a good time to sell any rental unit. However, if it's a student rental, we have to make sure that, as I said earlier, that we are looking at the timelines when the students are buying. Sometimes in Waterloo, you can get away with selling in June, July for people who are moving in for September 1st. But if you're in Guelph and McMaster area, a lot of the students are moving in May 1st. Okay, and also don't forget that we need 60 days notice for the tenants to move out. So if you're looking to close May 1st, we have to have a sale agreement by the end of April. Question number 2 is, my student renter is old, but it is in a great location. Should I do upgrades before selling, hoping to get a better price, or sell it as is? I think that the best way to know is I will definitely say, if you're going to do repairs, a lot of student rentals are older homes, right? So that's not a bad thing at all. But we just have to make sure that it's clean, it's presentable, it shows well. Depending on the budget that you have for renovations, we can look at some of those items that I was saying that would result in a higher return on investment. So I'd say if you are thinking about doing any renovations, I can come and take a look, or we can send one of our professionals who can come and look at the unit and they'll tell you what they think. And also we have to look at what else is around you. If you're one old home around newer homes and all the student rentals are new and they look nice, then yes, you might feel the pressure to improve some things. However, looking at the comparables, if your competitor is just, similar kind of property, yes, you get an advantage from being a better home, but also there's not as much pressure to improve things. When I answer this question, I always ask my clients what their budget is, because not everyone has 10,000 or 20,000 or 50,000 to do a remodel. So it always comes back to what's your budget? And then with that budget, we'll come up with the best case scenario, like a to-do list based on what the budget is. Question number 3. If you have questions, again, as I said, please feel free to post them here. But for now, I'll just go through the questions that were submitted ahead of time. Question number 3 is, with the mortgage rates expected to go down further, do you think prices will see an upward trend? That is a good question. So right now, rates have already been going down for the last couple of months. Yes, we're seeing some activity, but not as much as we expected. If you asked me 6 months ago, I would have said that this market should be a better market than we're seeing right now because rates have come down. However, what we're seeing is this. Fixed rates are not going down as much because the fixed rate mortgage is set in comparison to the bond market. So if the bond market is doing really well, then fixed rates will stay high. So because of that, we haven't seen a big change in fixed rates. So maybe as fixed rates change further and further, maybe we'll see people come back into the market. Bottom line is we've seen a lot of fluctuation over the last 2 years. And the truth is you have a good chance of selling your home if it's well presented and it's the home that people want to buy. However, if we do the bare minimum, then we have 10 or 20 other homes to compete with on the market. So I'd say it's a market where people are still selling, but that home has to show well. It has to be the home that people want to buy compared to 10 other that are on the market in the same neighborhood. And that's also another thing that we're struggling with is that as the market gets better and the buyer comes back, we're seeing more inventory. So now instead of competing with 5 homes, you're competing with 10 other homes and everybody wants to look well. So that's why I'm saying presentation right now in this market is key because now we have more competition. You have 5 or 10 other homes that are competing with you as compared to when it was just a few homes in the neighborhood. Okay, what if the current students are not ready for showings? As a landlord, do I have rights to still have showings? Yes, you do. In this case, if the students say they're not ready, my job is to find out why they're not ready. As I said, sometimes there's a situation where maybe someone has a medical reason. At one point, we had a student who was going through chemo. So those are all things that we can talk to them about, find out what their schedule is, and find out what it would take to change that. Because we've had landlords who will pay the students maybe 1 month rent for them to go and live with their parents during that season. So I can't say no, and I can't say that will force them because there are situations sometimes that are beyond control. However, they can't just say, oh, I'm not ready for showings because I'm not ready. That is not acceptable, right? It has to be within reason. So in a situation that is within reason, we can usually work with the student, find out the schedule, find out what it will take to get them ready, and then continue showings. But we've also had situations where people are just being difficult. And in a situation like that, we would not tolerate that. So we have to work with a legal professional who can help navigate the situation. Okay, does vacant possession attract a better offer than occupied? On average, I'd say yes, because a vacant possession home shows better. And when I say this, I'm not telling you to get rid of your tenants before we list, because for the most part, you can't do that legally unless you give them cash for keys. And if you're doing cash for keys, my recommendation is that you don't do it. Don't do it yourself. Hire a professional. In this case, we can recommend some paralegals that can help you because the paralegals know a better way to negotiate. I've negotiated my own N11s or my cash for keys because I've had the experience over the years to confidently do that. Secondly, though, you need to have legal protection. The forms that you're signing need to be legally binding and they need to be written in a way that protects you. I've seen tenants, believe it or not, that will take the N12, the N11, they will receive the money and they'll still go and sue at the LTB, right? So that's why I'm saying that when you're doing cash for keys, my advice would be that you don't do it yourself unless you know exactly what you're doing and you know how to write contracts that are legally binding that will protect you from future lawsuits. Okay? But yeah, that was the real thing. A tenant received money from the landlord, they signed an N11 and they still went to the LTB and sued. Of course, they lost, but they've wasted all this time. The case probably took about 2 years for them to go through. So it wastes time and money for the landlord. But had they written certain forms or had they written it in a way where the tenant can't even sue, they would have been protected. Okay. Okay, the next question is, does selling a student rental require any special document other than the usual sales documents? This is, so what I can say is there's a lot of paperwork that goes into selling a home. And yes, we have to do the initial listing presentation, all the different forms that the real estate office will require, that we're required to do by the Ontario government through OREA, right? We have forms that we have to get you to sign. However, if we are doing more, like, you know, issuing those the N11s and N12s and all the different forms that we have to notify the tenants, we have to get you to sign, you know, all, for example, if we're, you know, doing showings and we have to issue 24-hour notice, there's different things that you might have to sign just because of the tenant situation that's in place. And also, if you're working, I have to say that I'm not a paralegal. So on some of these tenant landlord issues, I will not represent you on those issues, but I can recommend someone on our team who will represent you. These are professionals that we've worked with for years. They know what they're doing, and we've had success working with them, be it, you know, when we're selling the properties and we need to issue these notices, or even like when we go to the LTB, because I'm a landlord, as I said. So there are situations where I have to go to the LTB to deal with the tenant situation. So we have proper professionals that we've vetted and we trust to take you through this process. So I just want you to know, I think that a lot of people ask me that question, can I help them? I will give advice because I know the forms. I can explain to you and you can do it yourself. But if you don't feel comfortable doing it, then we connect you with a professional who can do it for you. So is there more paperwork? Absolutely. But this is what I can promise you. We will always explain everything that you're signing so that you know what you're signing. Step by step, you have a good understanding of what you're signing and why you're signing it. Right now, because it's a general scenario, I can't predict what you'll sign. But if we're sitting down and we're talking about specific property and we know the needs of that property, then yes, we will go through all the different forms that you need to sign. Okay, the next question is, I want to sell my rental unit near downtown Hamilton. Should I list it now to get the best rate or wait for January 2025? So if this is a student rental that you want to sell downtown Hamilton, there are different, downtown Hamilton is not really a student rental area, but if you are, there's different layers to this question. First of all, the property is near downtown Hamilton. That is really not a student neighborhood. So this is probably just a regular rental. And for a regular rental, you can list anytime. Statistically, if you're ready to go to market, I'd say don't go to market in December. Even now, because people are in the holiday mood, so they're not really looking at what's on market. So we see that sales usually go down in December. So you're better off if you wait for January, and usually like the 2nd or 3rd week of January when people are back to work. So that would be what I would do. However, if you have a student rental, in which case this property is not because it's near downtown, then you probably should consider listing around February. And I think there's a lot of things, a lot of layers to this question, but just to keep it simple, I'd say yes, wait for January. I own a rental property in Waterloo area, but it's not a student rental. Do student rentals make more money? I would say that yes and no at the same time, because with student rentals, like if you're here, you're an investor, you probably already know it's rented by room. If you have more rooms, then yes, you might be able to make more money on a student rental. However, if you have fewer rooms and you have 2 units, you might be able to make more money. Majority of our properties are multi-units. So you can make more money if you have, let's say, 2 or 3 tenants paying $1,800 to $2,500 separately, then you can collect a big check of like $5,000 or whatever the rental income is, which you might not be able to get if it's rented by a room, especially if you have fewer rooms. Right now, in our market, student rentals are going for about $800 to $1,000 per room. So if you have 5, 6 rooms, you might be able to get away with collecting up to $1,000 a room. In fact, I've seen somewhere where, you know, people, if it's a really nice room and it has an ensuite, you can even get $1,100, right, per room. We have some unique properties here that are built specifically for students, and it's like 4 bedrooms with 4 baths. So then each room would have its own ensuite. Those ones are definitely going up to $1,100, right? So if you have such a property, depending on how unique the property is, I feel like every property is different, and we cannot apply the same rule to all of them. It depends on the property. Next question is, what are the best practices for showings? Best practices for showings are making sure that you follow the rules, that you're not breaking any of the rules. You're giving 24-hour notice to all the tenants before the showings. Of course, it's good if the property shows well. A lot of the times when we're working with our clients, we make sure that we send a cleaner before we start all the showings. Of course, we can send a cleaner every day, but we can send a cleaner every now and then just to make sure the property is presentable. A lot of the times we also try to avoid times when students are sleeping or when they're busy. First of all, in Ontario, you have to be between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. But we still want to narrow that down to, like, let's say 10 a.m. because we know students, they're sleeping like they sleep late and then they wake up super late. So a lot of the times we'll restrict showings to like 10 a.m. to like 6, you know, just to make sure that the property shows well and people can actually access the property. Because if people go there and someone is sleeping, they won't even go in that room, and they won't. In most cases, people will not give an offer until they've seen all the rooms. So best practices for showings is to make sure that the property is accessible, it shows very well, and the rules are being followed. Okay, I think I have one more question here. The question is, have you ever owned or sold a student rental in the past? Absolutely. I've had a few student rentals. Some of my, a lot of them actually are multi-units, as I said. So sometimes we rent to separate groups up and down. And right now in the family, like my immediate family members also own some student rentals. So right now we definitely have a couple in the family. And our strategy is slightly different because as investors, we all have strategies, but a lot of our student rentals are premium student rentals, if I can say that, where the property is very, very nice and you can charge a premium for it. And a lot of the times we rent to international students or mature students. The one that we had in Kitchener that I sold in the last 2 years, it was rented to grads, like PhD students. So, and some of them were like couples or like a family that, you know, where the husband is in the PhD program and they have a wife or something like that. So it's kind of a student rental, but not your typical student rental. And for us, we like that strategy because we find that we get a better quality tenant and they're more mature, they'll pay a little more, they respect the property a little more. So as I said, and I learned this strategy from one of my clients years ago. I had a client who had like 10 student rentals and they were all premium student rentals. So it has to be a property that shows really well, that's nice and beautiful, but at the same time, you charge a premium for it. So that's been our strategy. Okay, so that's everything that we had today. I just want to take a minute to thank everyone for coming to our presentation today. And as I said, if you have questions, you can still reach out to us. We'll send an email with the recording. And if you have questions, you can always respond to that email and we'll be happy to help you. And I hope that this webinar has added something to your toolbox as an investor, and I hope that it help you achieve the goals that you have for 2024 as well as 2025. Anyway, thanks again for showing up, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.